So my name is Martin Whitlock. I'm CTO at Telenor IoT since 8 years plus now, something like that. So responsible for the portfolio, you could say, product management and engineering, architecture, the roaming department that Fredrik was mentioning as well, and stuff like that. And happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me and the rest of us. Really, really nice. Great place. Here to talk then a little bit more about the 2G, 3G sunsets and look at it from a different angle maybe than Fredrik sometimes. But I'll start with this slide. It's time to act. And I think actually there's some parts of this slide that give me away that I've been using it for a while. There are figures from 2022 here and so on. And this means, I mean, we've been talking about this for quite a long time with customers and partners and so to try to raise awareness of it, because it's gonna impact and will impact many of you who are today dependent on 2G. And Fredrik talked about our history. We've been in this business for a long time. So obviously we also have customers that have deployed devices for a long time. And the fun thing is that many of these devices 20, 30 years later are still there. That's amazing. But it, of course, has a best before date, depending on which market we're looking at. And to your question about how many 2G devices do we have, I should have had that question, but answer. But I mean, as an illustration here from Berg Insight, at the end of 2022, there were some 900 million cellular devices with 2G only. That's quite a lot. Obviously, not all of these are under immediate danger because they are on markets where 2G will be around for a long time, but still. Not so many 3G devices actually that are dependent on 3G, and I can talk a little bit more about that later. However, so every time I've shown this slide, there's been a little bit less time left on some markets, so feel the pressure. But just to back up a little bit, why are we, and now I represent the industry here, not only Telenor, but why are we as operators actually shutting down these networks? And there's a perfectly sane reason for it. And one of the key ones is that the spectrum that we're utilizing for the network, that's a natural resource. So we, of course, want to make sure that we can utilize this natural resource in the best way possible, and it comes in different flavors. And I think everybody knows that there's an immense increase in data being transmitted in the networks, not only IoT, but actually IoT data is starting to become very much visible on the total. That has not been the case historically. It's been a small, thin line, usually, on top of mobile broadband and everything. But now, IoT is really becoming something that we need to consider as well. But obviously, the handsets, we are streaming Netflix and whatever. So, I mean, everybody needs the capacity. And just as a little bit of a reference here, I used one of the KPIs that you could measure in the networks, that's bits per second and hertz. So if you take the hertz, the spectrum that we use, how efficient are the different technologies? And as you can see here, I mean, 2G compared to 4G, 0.17 bits per second and hertz on 2G compared to 16 to 30 in 4G. That tells you something about the value of the spectrum if you could have one technology compared to the other. There are, of course, other parameters here as well. It could be cost directly, but I choose to just look a little bit on the energy efficiency to transmit a gigabyte of data on these networks as well. And that is also very much increased, or yeah, the efficiency is increased. The energy is decreased per gigabyte. And that's also an important measure actually these days. Mobile operators are actually a consumer of electricity. We need to make sure that we keep our promise to sustainability and all that. So there, I could bring up other arguments as well, but I think you understand that this is something that eventually needs to happen. And it's not the first time we as an industry do generational shifts. I mean, we don't use the telegraph anymore, not even the GSM fax, even though that would be nice. But So we have moved away from technologies before, and now it's the technology that is, deployed in the early 90s, 2G. That's what we're going to shut down now. So in a very high-tech driven business, it's quite impressive that we're still using it. But there are new networks to come, obviously, that will help us build connectivity for tomorrow. But now that it happens, of course, it could be a huge nuisance and costly challenge if you have the requirement of doing a replacement program. We fully acknowledge and accept that and do whatever we can to support, of course, to minimize the damage. But I also would like to flip the coin a little bit and look at it from the bright side. I mean, because it's also an opportunity, as we see it, to maybe reinvent the way you're using IoT today. So, as I said, I've been doing this message for quite some time, and if you're in Sweden, which we are today, maybe the time to think ahead is almost getting behind us, to be frank. End of next year, there's not going to be any 2G or 3G left. There's still some time to maneuver, but not too much, right? Hopefully you have thought ahead already. But then again, there are other markets where this may not still be as urgent. But what we encourage is to use, with the help of us or on your own, do the inventory. Where do you have your devices in place? And Fredrik mentioned the Sunset tool that we have developed for both of our customers, which helps there, given the heat map and see, yeah, I'm really exposed in market X, right? Okay, take care of that. Think ahead. If you have a replacement program that needs to be taken care of, focus on those markets first. Maybe go to the lab, test how your devices will behave in this scenario, and so on. Just plan. Be as prepared as you can. And think for the future. But that's the first step. Then we believe, and we see that happening actually with a lot of our customers, that, okay, you have accepted the fact that earlier generations of connectivity is behind us. So what can we do instead? Because looking back at one of my first slides there, you can do, of course, so much more with modern technology. So maybe you have had a great business case in the past, collecting some rudimentary data using 2G, low bandwidth, no real-time activities or anything like that. And that has been fine. That's been a great addition to your product. But now you could do even more. Now we move into 4G, 5G era. Now we can do near real-time services, if that's what makes sense to you. We can design in capabilities for over-the-air updates with high bandwidth and so on. So much more to do. And maybe even it's time to rethink your business model. And we have a lot of customers doing that right now. How they sell. They are not longer selling products, they are selling services. And they can do that because the connected experience is completely different compared to just shifting boxes. So that is something that we at least encourage, to seize the moment. And what can you do more? Because one thing that you can be certain of is that someone else will do it in your industry, right? There's always going to be a challenger or front runner that will do something differently. So that's probably what you will have to fight against in your competition going forward. So better try to face that yourself and be one of those disruptors or leaders. Then eventually, and I say eventually, because you remember that we work very much globally. If we connect Hitachi's heavy machinery in 140 plus countries, a technology like 5G won't be available everywhere. I can assure you. Not today, not tomorrow, but not even the day after tomorrow. But yeah, maybe in a few years' time. Then we will be able to see those super modern networks everywhere. And we, as an industry, we might even have developed the business models for utilizing these super advanced technologies, which honestly we don't have today. We talk a lot about self-driving cars and ultra-low latency use cases and all these things. And sure, we can deploy them, and we can build them, we can sell them, but it's usually, as we spoke about over there, it might be in a factory setup right now. It might be in a location or geography where we know that we have 5G standalone networks, and there we can do it, and we can play around with business models. And that's a great thing to do, play around with business models, because that's how you get prepared for utilizing the most advanced technologies of tomorrow. But don't maybe bet on getting access to these technologies worldwide as of yet. I will speak a little bit more about that later. But what we see here is that, and this is also something, actually looking back to some of our oldest customers, I think many of them started off the M2M era before, when still IoT was an acronym meaning interoperability testing, which I learned, but now I had to relearn. But M2M, and you know, there were no established systems or interfaces or anything like that. You had to basically build your backend where you could see them in boxes at your site somewhere. So that was the old way of doing things. But today we have so much technology and ecosystem. We have cloud. We have standardized interfaces. We talk about APIs and things like that, which opens up this partnership model where you can enhance your IT connectivity solution with partner services and everything like that. And actually only the imagination is the limit here. And when I speak about 5G, I usually make the joke on myself and my industry that for every G that telco have introduced, we have thought that we've had the idea of what the next killer app for that generation is going to be. We were certain that 3G was going to be the era of video telephony. Yeah, that was, but we were wrong, right? 3G was the era of mobile broadband. We hadn't thought about that, but yeah, it was a great service anyway. So what happens is that when this new technology come in play, it's you in the room here who's going to do the business innovation and understand what these networks are going to be used for, not me. I'm going to do everything I can to support you realize that, but I think the business innovation comes from you. So, sunsets, if you go back to that, the main topic here. This is actually from this sunset tool that Fredrik was talking about as well, where we collect all information to us available. And we do that in many different ways. We do it based on our direct relationships that we have with our roaming partners, of course. We regularly ask all our 500 plus roaming partners, when do you plan to sunset? And sometimes we get the information very accurately, and sometimes we don't. But you can trust that we do everything we can to get that as early as possible. We, of course, also use GSMA, has our association of our network operators. They collect also similar information, and we get the information from there. Sometimes it's things that we haven't picked up ourselves. And we use public press releases, everything we can get to collect it into a database, basically. So with the caveat that we sometimes, operators do things that are totally unexpected, we have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen, at least for the next couple of years. And we collect this information, and we can do the heat mapping and everything like that. So this is a snapshot of what we know today of 2G sunsets to take place latest 2025. And as you can see here, the world map looks a little bit different depending on which region you're. And that's something that we strongly can see, that some regions like North America, very much early out in sunsetting. Australia as well, China too. China just moves on, back with the old and in with the new. So depending on where you are, it looks different. And Europe is now coming. Europe has a wave actually during 2025, when a lot of networks are going to be sunsetted. As you can see on the map here, the Nordics and Sweden and Norway specifically, they have, based on the spectrum auctions and the licenses that runs out for 2025, that's one of the key reasons why 2025 is the date when this is going to happen, right? And just recently, finally, the spectrum was auctioned and awarded, but it's going to be planned for 5G rollouts. In Europe, it's a little bit more scattered, so you can see quite a lot of yellow markets there, meaning that at least one operator will still be around with 2G covers for 2025, but some operators will have sunsets planned on those markets. So the thing is here that you need to understand, of course, where in the world you're deploying your devices. And for us, having very international customers, typically, this is one of the key things to monitor, and then we can use our tools and our knowledge to support this journey. But you also see that in large parts of Asia, South America, Africa, it's all blue. No planned sunsets in the coming years. And actually, I could extend its map to 2030 and it would look fairly the same. So this actually means something different. You can turn it around and say that you probably won't have 4G or 5G coverage in many of those markets in 2025 either. So the conclusion is, if you're going to go global, you still need 2G, this 90s technology. And I think this is one of the key things that I communicate for the last couple of years, actually, to my customers. As soon as we started to talk about narrowband IoT and LTM as being tomorrow's technology, I say, yes, it's going to be great, but don't forget to include 2G in your modem if you're going to sell it in Africa or Asia or somewhere else. You need it. Otherwise, you won't have the coverage you expect. So I understand that this is super complex and it could add cost to the bill of materials and things like that. But unfortunately, it's not anything I can do anything about. But I can definitely help you, my team can, to understand how to best plan for this. Or are you going to, do a LTE-only device for Europe and North America or some other markets and have that as one version and accept the fact that you get another SKU for parts of Africa or whatever? Or do you do one SKU and take the cost for everything? This is something we can talk about and plan together. As long as you know where to deploy your devices, we can help you with the information. Sure.
How comes that Japan is dark blue?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think
I can understand Greenland, for instance, but Japan.
No, exactly. That's why they don't sunset. Thank you. I got puzzled there for a while. They don't have GSM, so they can't sunset it. That's the reason. Sorry. Yeah. I was. But great question, obviously.
They never had PCH.
Yeah, they use their own technology for 2G. Flipping the slide here, looking at 3G. 3G, I think I touched upon this earlier, is not as critical typically for most IoT devices. It was came a little bit in between of the technologies. So 2G already had a good coverage profile, and if you were fine with 3G, you probably would be fine with 2G as well. There are some exceptions. There were some automotives being rolled out with 3G era, relying on 3G coverage for doing some of the more fancy use cases. But most of our customers, at least, they are not as sensitive to 3G as with 2G. Then there could be coverage aspects, as we talked about. There could be places where you have a 2G, 3G device, you have 2G, 3G networks, but on this exact location, you don't have 2G, but you have 3G. Shutting down 3G could mean coverage loss. So surely we look at this as well, but not as critical typically. But you can also see that even here we have a regional, you can at least see some trends based on region. Looking at Europe, for instance, there are more red countries in Central Europe for 3G than there was on 2G. Actually, it's based on this, what I just said. Most operators realize that they don't have that much dependency on 3G. So it's easier to take the decision to shut the network off than with 2G. So my prediction is that on many markets, we will see 2G actually live longer than the 3G networks. But that's just a few snapshot on the very highest level. Obviously, the devil's in the detail, and we're very happy to help out on digging down into specific countries and markets and everything like that. So what would you do instead then? If you have had a 2G, 3G, what are the options going forward? And here I think that there are quite a few aspects to consider when looking, and it doesn't only have to do with 2G, 3G replacement. It's actually in general when you design an IoT solution of today. I think you should consider a few parameters when choosing the network technology to include. First of all, of course, technical. What's your coverage? How is it a battery operated device that needs energy efficiency and all these things? I think, Håkan, you will touch a little bit more upon that in your presentation soon. Then you have the commercial. What does it cost you? And the cost, I would claim, is not only about the actual module or even the actual cost of transmission data over the network, but it could also be other things like how scalable is this? Is it available everywhere? Might even be cheaper to include many technologies into the same modem, because then I can sell one SKU on the global market. Things like that. A lot of parameters to consider. And then finally, the ecosystem. So what can I expect? And here I must say that, I mean, not all technologies are cellular. Obviously, I like to work with the cellular technologies because that's what I can provide. But there could be other technologies as well that provide certain qualities to complement the cellular, right? So things like that. And we have different types of categories going forward. Now we look into the 4G, 5G era now that you have the enhanced mobile broadband use cases, just transmitting a lot of data. Certain technology is good for that. You have the MTC, massive machine type communication, down the left corner there, where typically we have massive amount of devices, often battery operated or similar low cost. Certain type of technology is good for that. And you have the URLLC, ultra reliable, low latency use cases. Typically the really most advanced 5G stuff that I talked about previously, self-driving cars, drones, flying cross borders, and all these things. That's 5G standalone, which is the networks that we're actually as operators building up right now. So there's a huge amount of technologies. Håkan will touch a little bit more on these soon. And we have also 5G red cap in the middle there somewhere that solves a little bit of everything, actually. Quite exciting, but it's not quite here yet. So my point here is that there's a lot of different technologies. That's great. But even as a CTO, I claim that don't start focusing on the technology. Start focus about your use case, what you're going to do with the technology. Then it's so much easier to find the right technology for it. So where are you going to deploy? What you're going to do with it? How much data are you going to transmit? Do you have battery operational use cases? And all these things. So your business, your use case. Then there's more technology available than you probably need. That's it. We have we have Håkan and team to help you out and find the right technology. I also have a team that maybe have even more network focus on that. We're happy to support you. We have a white paper on our website that we release with new revisions now and then. So, yeah, that's it for me. Question, sure.
I usually tell my customers that 4G and 5G gonna go hand in hand like 2G and 3G has. How much am I lying / exaggerating on that one?
No, I think you're actually quite spot on. Yeah, continue saying that. No, and it's a good question. I often get that. How we start shutting down 2G, 3G now?
Yeah, so how long are 4G gonna live? That's the question.
Exactly. That's the question. And I can tell you the end date, actually. But I can say this, that you're right. 4G and 5G are designed to live together. Even looking at 5G today, the non-standalone requires 4G to be there. It's because of 4G core still. So what's going to happen is, and we have advances in technology with multi-radio base stations and things that we didn't have in the 2G, 3G era, but came into with 4G, meaning that as an operator, you can have good synergies supporting both technologies, even in the same base station. And another thing to consider is that from a spectrum efficiency perspective, I show you some figures there. There's not a huge difference between 4G and 5G if you're in the low bands, where we usually have 4G, right? Where 5G excels and 4G cannot even be relevant. That's in the really high frequency bands where we have lots of capacity. So what's going to happen is that we're going to have 4G devices with 5G capability as a mobile network. We're going to see, okay, now you're going to download a big file. We push you up to 5G, high frequency for a while to do that fast download, and then they're going to go back for coverage. And so we're going to play around. They're going to coexist for a long time. And there's no reason to be worried about 4G right now.
Suppose you really loved your GSM fax and you want to keep using it. Can you like buy a license for the radio frequency or use it, or is it if you buy like one of these hands-free FM adapters that you can put in a car without Bluetooth, and you can transmit a little bit of FM radio to your car and get it to work? Could you have a 2G local base station with some?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I would tend to say no, unless you're in a very contained environment. And why is that? Because the 2G device that you have today is built for a spectrum that is licensed, and you're typically not allowed by, PTS or whoever is the corresponding one in the market to transmit in this licensed spectrum. Sure, I mean, if you're like Telenor, you have a basement in Karlskrona with a Faraday's cage, and you have your antennas there to do a test lab, it works fine. Out on the street, you would probably violate some kind of law if you have that base station. I would say no.
No more GSM fax.
No more GSM fax.